My name is Caroline Mitchell. I'm 34 years old, and exactly 47 minutes after my sister Jessica declared that my son Ethan ruined the family photo, her husband did something that would shatter her perfect world into 1,000 irreparable pieces. It was Thanksgiving Day, November 23rd, 2023, at precisely 3:17 p.m. when those words left her mouth in my parents' living room. By 4:05 p.m., her marriage was over, her reputation in ruins, and the family dynamics we'd maintained for 3 decades had collapsed entirely. Before I explain what happened in that devastating hour, let me know where you're viewing from and hit subscribe if you've ever been made to feel like your child wasn't good enough for someone else's standards. The photo in question was supposed to be simple. My mother had hired a professional photographer, Sandra Kim, to capture our extended family at the annual Thanksgiving gathering. Everyone was dressed in coordinating autumn colors, burgundy, cream, and forest green, standing in front of my parents' stone fireplace in their Westchester County home. My son Ethan, who is 7 years old and has Down syndrome, was positioned in the front row between his cousins. He was wearing his favorite bow tie, the one with tiny turkeys on it that he'd picked out himself at Target 3 weeks earlier. His smile was radiant, genuine, the kind of pure joy that comes from a child who doesn't yet understand that some people see him as less than. Jessica noticed it immediately when Sandra showed us the preview on her camera screen. "Oh, God," she muttered, loud enough for me to hear but quiet enough to maintain plausible deniability. "Can we retake that?" Ethan's making that face again. That face. As if my son's extra chromosome was a costume he could simply remove for better lighting. "What face?" I asked, my voice carefully controlled, though I could already feel heat rising in my chest. "You know," Jessica said, gesturing vaguely toward the camera, that expression. "His tongue is out and his eyes are— Can we just do one without him? Just one nice family photo where everyone looks normal." The word normal hung in the air like a grenade with the pin already pulled. My mother gasped softly. My father pretended to be suddenly fascinated by his phone. Jessica's husband, Marcus, went completely still, his jaw visibly tightening. But it was my 9-year-old niece, Sophia, Jessica's daughter, who spoke first. "Mom, that's mean," Sophia said quietly, her voice small but clear. "Ethan is family." Jessica whirled on her daughter with the kind of manufactured smile she used at her book club meetings. "Sweetheart, I'm just trying to get one nice picture. One perfect memory for Grandma and Grandpa. Is that so wrong?" "Yes," Marcus said, his voice low and absolutely cold in a way I'd never heard before. "It is." To really understand why that single word from Marcus carried such devastating weight, you'd have to go back 7 years to when I first told my family I was pregnant. Jessica had recently given birth to Sophia, her perfect firstborn with her perfect husband and their perfect life in their perfect colonial house in Scarsdale. I was the younger sister, the one who'd struggled with fertility for 3 years, the one who'd endured 2 miscarriages that Jessica described as nature's way of preparing me for the right pregnancy. When I finally got pregnant with Ethan, my 3rd attempt, the joy lasted exactly until my 20-week anatomy scan. The ultrasound technician went quiet, too quiet, and called in the doctor. Increased nuchal fold thickness. Shortened femur length. Markers for trisomy 21. The amniocentesis confirmed it 3 days later. Down syndrome. I remember calling Jessica from the parking lot of my obstetrician's office, tears streaming down my face, needing my big sister's support desperately. "Well," she'd said after a long pause, "you do have options, Carl. You're only 20 weeks. Nobody would judge you for making the practical choice." The practical choice. She meant termination. She meant ending my pregnancy because my son wouldn't be convenient enough, perfect enough, normal enough for her standards. "I'm keeping my baby," I told her, my voice shaking with a mixture of grief and anger and determination I didn't know I possessed. Of course," she'd backtracked quickly, her voice taking on that syrupy tone she used when she wanted to sound supportive while actually being condescending. "I just meant that it's going to be really hard, Caroline. Really, really hard. These kids, they have so many health issues, developmental delays. Your whole life will revolve around therapy appointments and special needs. Are you sure you're ready for that sacrifice?" What she didn't say, but what I heard clearly in her tone, was, "Are you sure you want to burden the family with this?" Ethan was born on April 15th, 2016, at 6:42 a.m., weighing 6 pounds 11 ounces. He was perfect. He had my husband David's dark curls and my green eyes, and yes, he had the distinctive features that come with an extra 21st chromosome. He also had a small hole in his heart that required surgery at 4 months old, hypotonia that meant he didn't sit up until 14 months, and a speech delay that had him in therapy 3 times a week by age 2. Jessica visited us in the hospital exactly once, staying for 23 minutes according to the visitor log. She brought a generic "it's a boy" balloon from the gift shop and spent most of the visit talking about Sophia's latest developmental milestones. "She's already trying to walk," Jessica announced, bouncing her 9-month-old daughter on her hip while my newborn son lay in the bassinet, still recovering from birth. "The pediatrician says she's advanced for her age. Top percentile for everything." She didn't ask to hold Ethan. Not once. Over the next 7 years, the pattern became impossible to ignore. Every family gathering became an exercise in erasure, in making my son invisible or palatable enough for Jessica's comfort. When Ethan finally walked at 26 months old, taking those first wobbly steps across my parents' living room on Christmas morning, Jessica was busy recording Sophia performing a rehearsed dance routine she'd learned in ballet class. When Ethan spoke his first clear word, "Mama," at age 3, a full year later than typical, but a triumph that made me weep with joy, Jessica changed the subject to Sophia's acceptance into the gifted program at her elementary school. "They said she's reading at a 5th grade level already," Jessica said, barely pausing to acknowledge my announcement. "We're looking into accelerated programs for her. You know how it is. You want to nurture their potential when they show such promise." The implication was clear. Some children had potential worth nurturing. Others didn't. My parents, God love them, tried to stay neutral in a way that actually enabled Jessica's behavior. My mother would make gentle suggestions about giving Jessica grace because she doesn't understand what it's like. My father would change the subject whenever tension arose, preferring comfortable avoidance to difficult conversations. They loved Ethan, I never doubted that, but they also didn't defend him when defense was desperately needed. Marcus was different from the beginning. He was a pediatric neurologist at Columbia Presbyterian, someone who understood neurodevelopmental differences not as deficits, but as variations. He'd been one of the first people to hold Ethan in the hospital, supporting his tiny head with practiced gentleness and telling me about the latest research in early intervention for children with Down syndrome. "The old models were all wrong," he'd said, sitting in the uncomfortable hospital chair while Jessica checked her phone for the 3rd time in 5 minutes. "These kids can do so much more than we ever thought possible. It's about giving them the right support, the right opportunities. Your son is going to surprise everyone, Caroline. I can already tell." Over the years, I watched Marcus's marriage to my sister with a mixture of pity and confusion. How did this kind, brilliant man stay with someone so fundamentally lacking in empathy? He never joined in Jessica's subtle digs about Ethan. He never made excuses for his daughter when Sophia parroted her mother's attitudes. Instead, he quietly counteracted Jessica's influence, taking Sophia to volunteer at programs for people with disabilities, having frank conversations with her about kindness and inclusion, buying books that featured diverse characters, including those with Down syndrome. "Uncle Marcus is my favorite," Ethan told me once after a family barbecue where Marcus had spent 40 minutes playing catch with him, patiently adapting the game to Ethan's motor skill level. "He doesn't look at me weird." Out of the mouths of babes. My 7-year-old son could articulate what I'd been feeling for years. Marcus saw him as a person, as a child with value and dignity, while Jessica saw him as an inconvenience, a flaw in the family portrait she was trying to paint. The tension had been building for years, accumulating like interest in a debt that would eventually come due. There was the time Jessica uninvited us from Sophia's 5th birthday party because it might be overwhelming for Ethan with all the noise and other children. Never mind that Ethan had been successfully attending inclusive birthday parties for 2 years by then. There was the family vacation to Disney World that got canceled because Jessica insisted that with Ethan's limitations, it wouldn't be fair to make everyone else accommodate his pace. There was Christmas 2021 when Jessica suggested we open presents in shifts, regular kids first, then Ethan separately, so that the family photos wouldn't be disrupted by his stimmying. Each incident taken alone could be explained away. Together, they formed an undeniable pattern of discrimination, of othering, of treating my son as less than human. And I endured it, making excuses, keeping the peace, swallowing my rage and hurt because I didn't want to be the difficult one, the sister who made everything about her kid. I kept a record, though, not initially with any particular plan, but because I needed to document that I wasn't crazy, that this wasn't normal family friction. I had a folder on my laptop labeled Family Events, filled with screenshots of text messages, saved emails, even a few voice memos from phone calls that had left me shaking with anger and grief. My best friend Rachel, who'd been my college roommate and was now a special education advocate, had been telling me for 3 years to set boundaries. She's teaching Sophia that it's okay to devalue people with disabilities, Rachel said after I told her about the canceled Disney trip. And she's teaching Ethan that he's not worthy of inclusion in his own family. How long are you going to let this continue? She's my sister, I'd said weakly, as if biology somehow excused cruelty. She's teaching your son that he's disposable, Rachel replied bluntly. Is that what you want him to internalize? It wasn't. Of course it wasn't. But confronting Jessica meant potentially fracturing the family, losing the illusion of unity that my parents valued so highly, admitting that maybe we weren't the close-knit family we all pretended to be. Then came this Thanksgiving. The Thanksgiving that would finally force everything into the open. The build-up to the holiday should have warned me. Jessica had texted me 3 weeks earlier with a detailed dress code for the family photo. Autumn jewel tones only. No bright colors or busy patterns. And Caroline, can you make sure Ethan's shirt is tucked in and his hair is combed? Last year's photos were difficult. Last year's photos had been beautiful. Ethan had worn a little vest and had smiled at the camera with such genuine happiness that it made my heart ache. But in Jessica's world, his visible joy wasn't enough to compensate for the fact that his features didn't match her aesthetic vision. I'd spent $147 on new outfits for Ethan and myself, carefully choosing shades that would coordinate with Jessica's color scheme while still letting Ethan wear something comfortable enough that he wouldn't be pulling at his collar all day. I'd practiced with him for 2 weeks, talking about fancy picture time and how he'd stand still and smile at the camera. He was excited, showing his grandparents his new bow tie via FaceTime and asking daily if it was picture day yet. When we arrived at my parents' house at 1:30 p.m., the house was already filled with the smells of roasting turkey and pumpkin pie. Ethan ran to find his grandfather, who was watching football in the den. Jessica was in the kitchen with my mother, directing the food preparation like a general commanding troops. She looked me up and down when I entered, her gaze lingering on Ethan's bow tie. "That's cute," she said, in a tone that made cute sound like an insult. Very Ethan. Marcus was setting the table in the dining room, carefully folding napkins into elaborate shapes that he'd learned from a YouTube video. He smiled when he saw us, a genuine warm smile that reached his eyes. "Hey, Caroline. Ethan. Looking sharp, buddy. Love the bow tie." Ethan beamed, running his fingers over the tiny turkeys. "It's my favorite," he announced proudly. "I can see why," Marcus replied. "Very distinguished choice." I watched Jessica's jaw tighten from across the room. She couldn't stand it when Marcus showed warmth to Ethan, as if kindness to my son was somehow a betrayal of her worldview. The afternoon progressed with the usual family chaos. Sophia, now 9 years old, was glued to her iPad, barely acknowledging anyone unless specifically addressed. My father carved the turkey with ceremonial precision. My mother fretted about whether the sweet potatoes had enough marshmallows. Jessica orchestrated everything from her position at the kitchen island, drinking wine and issuing directives. At 3 p.m., Sandra the photographer arrived, hauling in professional lighting equipment and a large reflector. She was warm and professional, greeting each family member and making them feel at ease. When she met Ethan, she knelt down to his level. "And who is this handsome gentleman?" she asked. "I'm Ethan," he said proudly. "I'm 7 3/4. 7 3/4 is a very important age," Sandra said seriously. "And that is an excellent bow tie. Did you pick that out yourself?" Ethan nodded enthusiastically, launching into the story of how he'd found it at Target with Daddy and how there were little turkeys on it, because Thanksgiving has turkeys. Sandra listened with genuine interest, not the fake attention adults sometimes give children. I felt some of my tension ease. This would be okay. It would be fine. We gathered in front of the fireplace. Sandra arranged us carefully, suggesting positions and adjusting heights. She put the children in front, Sophia, Ethan, and my parents' golden retriever, Bailey. Adults stood behind in 2 rows. Jessica positioned herself strategically behind Sophia, one hand on her daughter's shoulder like she was staking a claim. "Okay, everyone look at me," Sandra called, her camera raised. "On 3, everyone say pumpkin pie. 1, 2, 3. Pumpkin pie," we chorused. The camera clicked rapidly, multiple shots in succession. Ethan was smiling his biggest smile, the one that crinkled his eyes and showed all his teeth. He was happy, included, part of the family moment. Everything I wanted for him. Sandra reviewed the shots on her camera, her expression pleased. "These are great," she said. "Really wonderful. Let me show you." That's when Jessica inserted herself, moving to look over Sandra's shoulder at the camera screen. I watched her face change, watched her expression shift from polite interest to barely concealed disgust. And that's when she said it. "Oh God, can we retake that? Ethan's making that face again." The room went silent, not the comfortable silence of a pause in conversation, but the horrible silence of everyone collectively holding their breath, waiting to see if they'd really heard what they thought they'd heard. "What face?" I asked, my voice coming out smaller than I intended, almost a whisper. Jessica gestured at the camera screen, at my son's joyful expression. "You know, that expression. His tongue is out and his eyes are... Can we just do one without him? Just one nice family photo where everyone looks normal." My mother made a small sound, something between a gasp and a whimper. My father's face went carefully blank, the way it always did when he was retreating from conflict. Sandra the photographer looked like she wanted to disappear into the floor. And Sophia, sweet 9-year-old Sophia, who'd been raised by this woman, spoke up. "Mom, that's mean," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "Ethan is family." I felt like I was watching the scene from outside my body, disconnected from the moment, even as my heart was pounding so hard I could feel my pulse in my temples. 7 years of accumulated slights, of swallowed anger, of choosing peace over confrontation, all crystallizing in this single moment. Jessica turned to her daughter with that smile, that terrible smile that was all teeth and no warmth. "Sweetheart, I'm just trying to get one nice picture. One perfect memory for Grandma and Grandpa. Is that so wrong?" And that's when Marcus spoke. Just one word, delivered with the weight of 7 years of watching his wife's cruelty, of maintaining a marriage with someone whose values fundamentally conflicted with his own professional and personal ethics. Yes. The word fell like a hammer. Absolute. Final. Jessica whirled to face him, her expression shocked. "Excuse me." Marcus carefully set down the wine glass he'd been holding, placing it on the mantel with deliberate precision. When he spoke, his voice was calm, clinical even, but there was something underneath it, something that had been building for a very long time and was now finally breaking through. Yes, it is wrong, he said clearly. It's wrong to ask for a family photo that excludes a member of the family. It's wrong to describe your nephew as making a face when he's simply existing with the features he was born with. It's wrong to use the word normal, as if there's something abnormal about a child with Down syndrome. And it's wrong, profoundly ethically wrong, to do this in front of your daughter, teaching her that it's acceptable to devalue people based on disability. Jessica's face went from white to red in seconds. How dare you? This is a family matter, Marcus. You don't get to. I absolutely get to, he interrupted, his voice still calm but with steel underneath. I'm family too, Jessica. And more relevantly, I'm a pediatric neurologist who spent the last 15 years working with children exactly like Ethan. I know what you're doing. I've watched you do it for 7 years, and I'm done staying silent about it. My mother finally found her voice. Marcus, please. Let's not make a scene. It's Thanksgiving. Can't we just? No, Marcus said, turning to address her. With all due respect, Martha, we can't just anything anymore. This isn't a misunderstanding or a miscommunication. This is a pattern of discriminatory behavior that Caroline has endured with remarkable grace for far too long. He turned back to Jessica, and I saw something in his face I'd never seen before. Contempt mixed with something that looked almost like grief. Do you know what Sophia asked me last week? He said quietly. She asked me if Ethan was less smart than other kids. When I asked her why she thought that, do you know what she said? She said because you'd told her that kids with Down syndrome can't do things like regular kids can. Jessica's face went rigid. I was trying to prepare her for... For what? Marcus demanded, his voice rising for the first time. For a lifetime of ableist thinking? For believing that people's worth is determined by their cognitive ability or their appearance? Is that what you were preparing her for? That's not fair, Jessica said, her voice starting to shake. You're twisting my words. I've never been anything but kind to Ethan. Kind? I heard myself say, finally finding my voice. The word came out raw, scraped from somewhere deep. You think you've been kind? Everyone turned to look at me. I was trembling, my hands clenched so tight my nails were digging into my palms. 7 years of silence, of swallowing hurt, of protecting everyone else's comfort. It was all coming up now, unstoppable. You uninvited us from Sophia's 5th birthday party, I said, my voice gaining strength. You canceled the family Disney trip because Ethan would be too much work. You suggested we open Christmas presents separately so the photos wouldn't be disrupted. You've spent 7 years treating my son like he's a problem to be managed instead of a person to be loved. That's not... I didn't, Jessica stammered, looking around the room for support that wasn't coming. I have receipts, I continued, pulling my phone from my pocket. Text messages, emails, voicemails. 3 years' worth of documented incidents. Want me to start reading them out loud? Jessica's eyes went wide. You've been keeping track? What kind of person? The kind who needed proof. She wasn't crazy, I shot back. The kind who needed evidence that this wasn't normal sibling conflict. The kind who had to document her sister's cruelty, because otherwise I'd gaslight myself into thinking I was overreacting. I started scrolling through my phone, finding the folder I'd labeled Family Events. Here's one from June 2021. You texted me, maybe it's better if you and Ethan skip the beach house this year. It's just going to be stressful for everyone having to constantly supervise him around the water. I looked up at her. He'd been swimming with his adaptive aquatics class for a year by then. He's a better swimmer than Sophia. Jessica's mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. Here's another one. I continued, my voice steady now, powered by years of compressed rage. December 2020. You emailed me about Christmas Eve dinner. Can you bring something Ethan will eat instead of expecting him to try the normal food? It's just easier if he has his own separate meal, so he doesn't cause a disruption. I lower my phone. He was 4 years old, Jessica. 4. And you were already segregating him from family meals. Caroline, please, my mother interjected weakly. This isn't the time. When is the time, Mom? I turned to her, feeling something break open inside my chest. When is it okay to talk about how Jessica has treated my son? When she finally says something so egregious that even you can't ignore it anymore. My father stood up from his chair, his face uncomfortable. Now, honey, I think everyone's just a little emotional. Maybe we should all take a breath and... I've been taking a breath for 7 years, Dad, I said, my voice cracking. I've been breathing and staying silent and making excuses and trying to keep the peace while my sister treated my son like he was subhuman. And you've let it happen. You've both let it happen because it was easier than having a difficult conversation. The silence that followed was deafening. Sandra, the photographer, had quietly started packing up her equipment, clearly desperate to escape. Sophia was crying silently, tears running down her face. Bailey, the golden retriever, had retreated to his bed in the corner, as if even the dog could sense the family structure collapsing. Marcus spoke again, his voice quieter now, but no less firm. I've written this speech in my head approximately 47 times over the past 3 years, he said, looking at Jessica. Every time you made a comment about Ethan. Every time you excluded him. Every time I watched Caroline's face when you said something cruel, and then pretended it was concern. He took a breath, and when he continued, his voice was filled with a sadness that made my heart ache. I kept thinking you'd realize what you were doing, that maternal instinct would kick in and you'd see how your attitudes were affecting Sophia, that basic human decency would eventually override whatever internalized ableism was driving your behavior. But it hasn't. It's gotten worse. Marcus, you're being ridiculous, Jessica said, but her voice lacked its usual confidence. I love Ethan. I've always loved him. You just what? Marcus challenged. You just think he should be invisible? You just wish Caroline had made a different choice when she got that prenatal diagnosis? You just believe that people with Down syndrome are somehow less valuable than people without it. That's not what I think. Jessica shouted, her composure finally cracking. You're putting words in my mouth. Am I? Marcus pulled his own phone from his pocket. Because I have some screenshots too. Want to hear what you said about Ethan in the group chat with your book club friends? Jessica's face went completely white. You went through my phone. Sophia showed me, Marcus said quietly. Last week. She was upset about something you'd said and wanted to know if I thought it was wrong. So yes, I saw your messages. The one where you called Ethan the family burden. The one where you said Caroline was selfish for not thinking about how this would affect everyone else. The one where you joked about having to pretend to care about his developmental milestones. The room went so silent I could hear my own heartbeat. Jessica looked like she was going to be sick. That was private, she whispered. Those were private conversations. There's no such thing as private bigotry, Marcus replied. Either you believe Ethan has equal value as a human being or you don't. And your private conversations make it very clear what you actually believe. I found myself sitting down on the couch, my legs suddenly unable to support me. All those years of wondering if I was being too sensitive, if I was projecting my own insecurities onto innocent comments. And she'd been saying these things all along. Openly, to her friends. How could you? I heard myself say, the words barely audible. Jessica turned to me, and for the first time in 7 years, I saw something like genuine panic in her eyes. Caroline, you have to understand. Those messages, they were taken out of context. I was venting. I was frustrated. I didn't mean. You meant every word, I said, my voice hollow. That's the thing about private conversations, Jessica. That's where people tell the truth. Who you are when nobody's watching. That's who you really are. Marcus was still talking, his words coming faster now, like a dam finally breaking. Do you know what it's been like, being married to you while watching this? Loving Sophia while knowing she's learning these attitudes from you? Trying to counteract your influence while still maintaining some semblance of a united front as parents? He ran his hand through his hair, a gesture of frustration I'd seen 1,000 times before, but never understood the depth of until now. I've been taking Sophia to volunteer at the Special Olympics for 2 years. 2 years, Jessica, trying to teach her that people with disabilities are valuable, are worthy of respect and inclusion. And every time we come home, you undo all of that work with your comments and your attitudes and your casual cruelty. Casual cruelty? Jessica's voice was rising again, defensive. I have never been cruel to that child. His name is Ethan. I shouted, standing up again. His name is Ethan, not that child, not the burden, not the problem with the family photo. His name is Ethan, and he's my son, and he's your nephew, and he deserves so much better than your tolerance. He deserves actual love. Sophia's quiet crying had turned into sobs. My mother was crying too now, sitting in my father's chair with her face in her hands. My father looked like he wanted to be anywhere else in the world. Marcus crossed the room to stand beside me, and when he spoke again, his words were directed at the whole family. Ethan is 7 years old. He loves dinosaurs and swimming, and when his grandfather reads him stories, he works twice as hard as other kids his age just to do basic things like tying his shoes and reading simple words. He goes to speech therapy 3 times a week and physical therapy twice a week, and he never complains. He has more resilience and genuine joy than anyone I've ever met. He turned to look at Jessica. And you have treated him like an inconvenience, like something to be ashamed of, like his very existence is a burden on this family. That's not a misunderstanding or a miscommunication. That's a fundamental failure of character. Don't you lecture me about character, Jessica hissed. You've been keeping secrets, going through my phone, turning my daughter against me. I showed him the messages, Mom, Sophia said, her voice thick with tears. I showed him because I wanted to know if what you were saying was wrong, because it felt wrong. And Uncle Marcus told me the truth, that it was wrong, that Ethan is just as important as anybody else, that disabilities don't make people less valuable. Jessica stared at her daughter, betrayal written across her face. Sophia, honey. Don't, Sophia said, standing up. She was 9 years old, and in that moment she looked so much older. Don't try to explain it away. I'm not a baby. I know what those words meant. You've been teaching me to think badly about Ethan, and I don't want to think that way anymore. She walked across the room to where I was standing and wrapped her arms around my waist. I'm sorry, Aunt Caroline, she whispered. I'm sorry I ever listened to her. I held my niece close, tears finally starting to fall down my own face. Over her head, I watched my sister's world crumble in real time. The mask she wore, the perfect image she cultivated, it was all stripping away, revealing something ugly underneath. Marcus pulled an envelope from his jacket pocket. I've been carrying this around for 2 weeks, he said, holding it up, waiting for the right moment, or maybe the courage. These are divorce papers, Jessica. I'm filing for sole custody of Sophia. The room exploded. My mother gasped. My father stood up, so fast his chair fell backward. Jessica's face went through a rapid series of expressions. Shock, disbelief, rage, panic. You can't be serious, she breathed. Over this? You're going to destroy our family over a photo. No, Marcus said calmly. I'm going to protect our daughter from learning that it's acceptable to devalue human beings based on disability. I'm going to model for her that there are consequences for cruelty. And I'm going to stop pretending that our marriage is something worth saving when it's built on fundamentally incompatible values. He turned to look at Sophia, his expression softening. Honey, I need you to understand something. This isn't your fault. Not any of it. The problems between your mom and me, they've existed for a long time. They just got impossible to ignore today. I know, Dad, Sophia said quietly. I've known for a while that you weren't happy. I could tell. Jessica, finally, seemed to find her voice again. You're turning my daughter against me. You're using this, she gestured wildly at me and Ethan, situation to manipulate her, to make me look like the bad guy. You made yourself the bad guy, I said, my voice steady despite my tears. Nobody did this to you. You did it to yourself. I picked up my phone again, scrolling to find specific messages. August 2022. You texted me. I feel bad saying this, but sometimes I'm glad Sophia doesn't have any of those issues. I couldn't handle what you deal with. I looked up at her. That's my life you're calling something you couldn't handle. That's my son you're reducing to a list of issues. You're taking everything out of context. Jessica shouted, You're making me sound like some kind of monster when all I've ever tried to do is be realistic about the challenges you face. The only challenge I face is you, I said, my voice rising to match hers. Your judgment, your pity, your constant implication that my son is a tragedy instead of a triumph. You know what the hardest part of having a child with Down syndrome is? It's not the medical appointments or the therapy sessions or the developmental delays. It's people like you. People who look at him and see problems instead of potential. People who treat inclusion as a favor instead of a right. I was shaking now. Years of compressed emotion finally finding release. Do you know how many times I've cried in my car after family events? How many times I've had to explain to Ethan why Aunt Jessica didn't want him at the birthday party, or the vacation, or the holiday dinner. He's 7 years old, and he already knows that some people see him as less than. And that breaks my heart more than any diagnosis ever could. My mother stood up, her face streaked with tears and mascara. Caroline, honey, I know Jessica hasn't always handled things perfectly, but she's your sister. Can't we find a way to... To what, Mom? I turned to face her. To pretend this didn't happen? To make excuses for her behavior again? To ask me to forgive and forget because that's easier than holding her accountable. I just think that families should protect each other, I interrupted. Families should stand up for each other. Families should create safe spaces where every member is valued and included. I gestured around the room. This isn't family. This is people who share DNA and holiday dinners, while one of them systematically excludes and devalues a child. That's not family. That's just proximity. My father finally spoke, his voice gruff with emotion. Caroline, you know we love Ethan. We've always loved him. Have you? I asked, and I watched him flinch at the question. Because love is verb, Dad. It's action. And your action has been to stay silent while Jessica hurt us over and over again. You've prioritized her comfort over Ethan's dignity. You've chosen false peace over real justice. That's not love. That's cowardice. The word hung between us like a slap. My father's face crumpled, and for the first time in my life I saw him cry. I'm sorry, he whispered. I'm so sorry. You're right. We should have said something years ago. We should have protected him. Marcus spoke again, his voice cutting through the emotion. I've been documenting things too, he said. Every comment, every exclusion, every incident over the past 3 years. I have a folder that's 87 pages long detailing a pattern of discriminatory behavior that no family court would find acceptable. He looked at Jessica, and his expression was almost pitying. I'm not trying to destroy you. I'm trying to save our daughter from becoming you. And I'm trying to make amends in whatever small way I can. For the years I stayed silent while you hurt this family. Jessica's hands were shaking. You've been planning this. You've been building a case against me. No, Marcus said. I've been hoping you'd change. Documenting things was my insurance policy, my way of making sure I wasn't imagining the severity of the problem. I kept thinking you'd have a moment of clarity, that you'd realize what you were doing. But that moment never came. He paused, then added quietly, until today, when you suggested excluding a 7-year-old child from a family photo because his genetic condition makes you uncomfortable. Sandra, the photographer, had finished packing her equipment and was hovering near the door, clearly desperate to leave. I'm going to step out, she said awkwardly. I'll email you the photos we did get. I'm sorry for your family's difficulties. She left, and the click of the door closing felt like a period at the end of a sentence. The family we'd been, the illusion we'd maintained, it was over. There was no going back to before this moment. Sophia was still standing beside me, her arms still around my waist. Ethan, who'd been remarkably quiet through all of this, came over from where he'd been sitting on the floor near the fireplace. "Mama's sad?" he asked, looking up at me with those eyes that saw so much more than people gave him credit for. "A little bit, baby," I said, picking him up even though he was getting too big for it. "But it's okay. Sometimes being sad is part of getting better." He hugged me tight, his small arms strong around my neck. Then he turned his head to look at Jessica, and what he said next absolutely shattered me. "I'm sorry I made the picture wrong," he said, his voice small and uncertain. "I can try to smile different next time." The silence that followed was the worst yet. My precious son, my beautiful boy, apologizing for existing, for having features he didn't choose, for being exactly who he was born to be. "No," I said fiercely, holding him tighter. "No, Ethan. You didn't do anything wrong. Nothing. You smiled perfectly. You looked handsome and happy, and that's exactly right." Marcus crouched down to be at eye level with Ethan. "Your smile is one of my favorite things about you, buddy," he said gently. "Don't ever change it for anyone." Ethan nodded, reassured but still confused by the dulled emotions swirling around him. "Can I have pie now?" he asked, because he was 7 and resilience came naturally to him in ways adults struggled with. "Yeah, baby," I said, setting him down. "Go ask Grandma for pie." My mother, grateful for something concrete to do, took Ethan's hand and led him toward the kitchen. My father followed, leaving just Jessica, Marcus, and me in the living room. Jessica was crying now, not the elegant tears she produced at sad movies, but ugly, desperate sobs. "I never meant to hurt him," she said. "I never wanted him to think. I didn't realize." "That's the problem," I said, my voice tired now, the adrenaline draining away. "You didn't realize because you never bothered to think about it. You never put yourself in his position, never considered what your words and actions meant from his perspective. You just decided he was other, and you treated him accordingly." "I can change," Jessica said desperately, looking between Marcus and me. "I can do better. I'll go to therapy. I'll educate myself. You should do those things," Marcus said. "Not for us, but for yourself. And definitely for any chance you have of maintaining a relationship with Sophia. But it doesn't change what's happened. It doesn't undo the damage." He pulled out his phone, typing quickly. "I'm texting my attorney now. We'll be filing papers Monday morning. I'll be staying at the Courtyard Marriott tonight with Sophia. You can keep the house for now. We'll work out the details later." "Marcus, please," Jessica begged. "Don't do this. Not on Thanksgiving. Not in front of everyone. Can't we at least talk about this in private?" "We've talked," Marcus said, his voice final. "I've tried talking to you about your attitudes toward Ethan for 3 years. You either dismissed my concerns or promised to do better without actually changing. I'm done talking." He called for Sophia, and she came immediately, my mother trailing behind with Ethan, who had a plate of pie in his hands and chocolate smeared on his face. "We're going to go, honey," Marcus said to his daughter. "Say goodbye to everyone." Sophia hugged my parents, then came to me. "Thank you for being brave," she whispered in my ear. "I want to be brave like you when I grow up." Then she did something that made my mother gasp. She knelt down and hugged Ethan, chocolate and all. "I love you, cousin," she said clearly. "You're perfect, exactly the way you are." Ethan, pie-drunk and happy, hugged her back. "Love you too, Sophie. Can you come play at my house soon?" "Absolutely," Marcus answered for her, giving me a look that said he meant it. They left. The door closed behind them, and Jessica collapsed onto the couch, her face in her hands, her shoulders shaking. I stood there looking at my sister, this person I'd known my entire life, and felt nothing but emptiness. Not rage anymore, not hurt, just a vast hollow space where our relationship used to be. "I think we should go too," I said to my parents. This isn't how I wanted today to end, but it needed to happen. It's been building for too long. My mother nodded, tears still flowing. "I understand. I'm so sorry, Caroline. We should have done better by you and Ethan." "You still can," I said. "The question is whether you will." My father helped me gather Ethan's things, his jacket, his special cup, his dinosaur that went everywhere with him. At the door, he hugged me tight, something he hadn't done in years. "I'm proud of you," he whispered. "I should have said that more. I should have shown it more. I'm proud of who you are and how you love your son." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. In the car on the way home, Ethan fell asleep in his car seat, pie coma overtaking him. I drove in silence, watching the street lights blur past, processing everything that had happened. My phone buzzed. A text from Rachel. "How was Thanksgiving? How's my favorite little man?" I pulled over to respond, my hands shaking too much to text while driving. Everything exploded. "I'll call you tomorrow." "But Rachel, I think I'm finally free." The next few days were chaos. Jessica called me 34 times between Friday and Sunday. I answered exactly once on Saturday afternoon when Ethan was at his swimming lesson. "What do you want, Jessica?" I asked, my voice flat. "I want to apologize," she said, her voice hoarse from crying. "Really apologize, not just say words. I want to understand what I did wrong. I want to fix this." "You can't fix it," I said. "What you can do is work on yourself. Get therapy. Educate yourself about disability. Examine your internalized ableism and figure out where it comes from. But you can't fix what you did to Ethan, to me, to Sophia. That damage is done. So you're just writing me off? Years of being sisters and you're just done." "I'm done being hurt by you," I corrected. "I'm done exposing my son to your judgment. I'm done making excuses for your behavior or managing everyone else's emotions around it. If you want a relationship with me someday, you'll have to earn it. And that starts with genuine change, not performative apologies." "I don't know how," she said, her voice breaking. "That's not my problem to solve," I replied, and I meant it. "You're an adult. Figure it out." I hung up and blocked her number. Maybe someday I'd unblock it. Maybe not. Either way, it was my choice now, my boundary to set. Marcus filed for divorce the following Monday. The grounds included irreconcilable differences and concerns about parental fitness related to teaching discriminatory attitudes to their minor child. His attorney had indeed compiled that 87-page document, and from what Marcus told me later, it was damning. The divorce proceedings took 8 months. During that time, Jessica went through court-mandated therapy and took parenting classes focused on raising children with awareness of diversity and inclusion. She fought the custody arrangement initially, but when Sophia testified in chambers with a court-appointed advocate about her mother's attitudes and her own discomfort with them, the judge awarded Marcus primary custody with Jessica getting supervised visitation until she completed a comprehensive program on disability awareness and bias reduction. It wasn't the outcome anyone had wanted, but it was the one Jessica's behavior had earned. My parents, to their credit, took my words to heart. My father started attending my monthly support group for families of children with Down syndrome. sitting quietly in the back for the first few sessions before gradually beginning to share. My mother joined the board of the local disability advocacy organization and became, surprisingly, one of their most effective fundraisers. "I can't undo not defending him when it mattered," she told me 6 months after that Thanksgiving. "But I can make sure other families don't make the same mistakes we did. I can use my privilege and my platform to advocate for inclusion." It was more than I'd expected from her. Not enough to erase the years of passive enabling, but enough to begin rebuilding trust. 1 year after that devastating Thanksgiving, we gathered again, but not at my parents' house. We met at my home, the space David and I had created where Ethan was always fully welcome, always fully valued. The guest list was different this time. My parents, Marcus and Sophia, Rachel and her wife, and 3 families from Ethan's inclusive classroom at school. We didn't take a formal family photo. Instead, Ethan and his friends played in the backyard while the adults talked and laughed. When we did pull out phones to capture the moment, it was organic, joyful, real. Ethan was front and center in every shot, his smile as bright and beautiful as ever. Jessica wasn't there. She'd completed her programs and was slowly rebuilding her relationship with Sophia through weekly therapy sessions and supervised visits. Marcus reported that she was doing the work, genuinely trying to change, but that the damage to their marriage was irreparable. Some things, once broken, can't be put back together. I'd received one letter from her, handwritten, that arrived on the anniversary of that Thanksgiving. In it, she apologized, not with excuses or justifications, but with real acknowledgement of harm done. She wrote about what she was learning in therapy, about confronting her own biases and fear and toxic perfectionism. She asked for nothing, demanded nothing, just laid out her understanding of what she'd done wrong. I'd read it 3 times, cried, and put it in a box. Maybe someday I'd respond. Maybe not. The choice was mine, and that alone was healing. The most surprising development came from Sophia. Now 10 years old and living primarily with Marcus. She'd asked if she could volunteer at Ethan's therapeutic horseback riding program. Every Saturday morning, she showed up to help lead horses and encourage riders, including her cousin. The transformation in her was remarkable, from a child who'd absorbed her mother's biases to someone actively working to counteract them. "Ethan's my favorite person to work with," she told me one Saturday after the session. "He tries so hard and he never gives up. He's teaching me about resilience." I'd hugged her tight, grateful that at least one good thing had come from the wreckage of that Thanksgiving. As I sit here now, writing this all out, Ethan is 8.5 years old. He can read simple books, swim independently, and tie his shoes with only minimal help. He has friends at school who don't see his disability first. They see Ethan, their classmate who loves dinosaurs and always shares his snacks. He still goes to speech therapy and occupational therapy, still works harder than his peers for achievements that come easily to them, and still has that smile that lights up every room he enters. The family photo from that Thanksgiving never got printed. Sandra had emailed the files as promised, and there was Ethan in the front row, tongue slightly out, eyes crinkled with genuine joy, absolutely perfect. I had it printed on a canvas that now hangs in our living room. A reminder of the moment everything changed, the moment I finally chose my son's dignity over false family peace. To everyone reading this who's been made to feel like their child doesn't measure up, like their family member is somehow less than because they're different, I see you. I know the weight of choosing between your child's well-being and family harmony. I know the exhaustion of constantly advocating, constantly explaining, constantly defending your loved one's right to simply exist in spaces where they should automatically belong. Here's what I've learned. Family isn't about shared genetics or holiday traditions. It's about who shows up for you when it matters, who values the people you love, who creates space for everyone to belong. Sometimes that family includes the people you grew up with. Sometimes it doesn't. And that's okay. The people who've become my real family over the past year, Marcus and Sophia, Rachel and her wife, the other parents from Ethan's school, the therapists who treat my son with dignity and joy. They're the ones who matter. They're the ones who see Ethan's extra chromosome as just another part of who he is, like his curly hair or his love of swimming. Boundaries aren't walls meant to punish. They're definitions of acceptable behavior meant to protect. Setting them doesn't make you the villain, even when people try to paint you that way. Standing up for your child's inherent worth doesn't make you difficult or oversensitive. It makes you a good parent. That Thanksgiving photo, the one Jessica tried to exclude Ethan from, ended up being published in our local newspaper's feature on inclusive family traditions. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. My son's joyful smile, the one my sister called wrong, became the image that represented unconditional family love to thousands of readers. Jessica saw it. According to my mother, she cried for 3 hours. I don't know if those were tears of regret or tears of self-pity, and honestly, I don't need to know. Her journey is her own now. Mine is about building a life where my son never has to apologize for smiling, for existing, for being exactly who he is. So here's my final question for all of you. Have you ever had to choose between family peace and someone's dignity? How did you find the courage to set boundaries when it meant potentially losing relationships you valued? Share your story in the comments below. I promise you're not alone in the struggle. And if you've made it this far in my story, if you've recognized yourself in any part of it, hit subscribe. Because we need to keep talking about this. We need to keep sharing these stories. We need to keep reminding each other that different doesn't mean less, that inclusion isn't a favor but a right, and that the family we choose is just as valid as the family we're born into. Thank you for listening. Thank you for seeing Ethan, not as a diagnosis or a challenge, but as the beautiful, joyful, resilient person he is. And thank you for understanding that sometimes the greatest act of love is knowing when to walk away from people who refuse to love the same way you do. My son is enough. He has always been enough. And any family that can't see that doesn't deserve a place in our story.